The broadcast is live.
We're live.
Da-da-da-da. Where are the people?
Everybody.
Where's the people?
What do you mean, where's the people?
I know. I'm just messing with you. It's live. People should be here. They should be lining up.
They are.
We're buying tickets for this.
We've got 11 people in the house already. We got Cherry from Black's Tropical Homestead. We got Jesse, our moderator, and we got Tracy, one of my great subscribers from all time. Then we got Rebecca Davis. She's amazing at crocheting hats for YouTubers. Then we got Tony at Kettle's Kitchen.
There's Kettle Kitchen.
We got Kristen at Capone's Cabin.
Hello, hello.
We got Denise, who just became a subscriber to my channel. Welcome. That's all. It's made comments here. Welcome, everybody. And if you're joining us on the replay.
Oh, wait. My thing says, oh, there they are. So mine said private chat, so I wasn't seeing anything, but now I see everybody. Hi, everybody.
We're good to go.
Yeah, I see under comments.
We're newbies to these folks.
I know.
But okay, why do I feel like I'm not looking at the camera? There we go.
You're looking at the camera, am I? I guess the camera's up here, but I'm looking at you. I don't know.
Then we got Lisa from Lazy Days Ahead and Carrie from My Table of Three. Welcome in, Old Nance.
Nice.
And Georgina and Diana. Welcome in. And then
the cool thing is, I recognize some of those names because they're joint subscribers.
Because
that's cool. Getting good information out to all the good information getters right there.
Then we got Nick at Highland Homestead. Welcome in. He's almost to monetization. He just needs 70 more hours.
Oh, wow.
Then we got Dragonflies Ozark Homestead. Welcome in. How are you doing? Then we got Susie.
I was born in Colorado, Susie. I was born in Greeley.
Nice
I was. I grew up in Boulder. Well, I didn't grow up in Boulder. I was in Boulder until I was 5.
Then we got Mary Bones Living.
I like the names. The names are all cool.
Hey, there's my neighbor. We won't disclose where we live, but there's my neighbor, Tiffany.
Hi, neighbor.
She sells Norwex, by the way.
Yeah, I'm from actually in Oregon. I go over to Costco in Roseburg. Ms. Lazy Days Ahead. We should have coffee.
Then we got Tina Harvey. There's Mom. All right. Then we got Hope Sellers. Welcome in. And Ginger Smith. I'm afraid I missed you.
Is that better?
Now you're like me. You know what I do for a ring light? Like
what?
I use my OT lights.
Do you? I have an OT light over here.
I got one on
I don't know.
Oh,
I have all these gadgets.
Like why do I need to buy a $50 light? All right, that's
yeah.
So, like Nick, everybody is that there's a new era in canning here that everybody wants to learn and preserve food for good reason.
Mom was born in Greeley.
Huh?
Oh, she was saying her mom was born in Greeley, where I was born. Cool.
And we got Diana the Canning Nana. Welcome in.
Do.
I just saw her pop in, and Amy.
You did. I'm excited. This is fun.
So, I'm going to forget what I wanted to say. But anyway.
She actually had an agenda, you guys. She said, I should have emailed you the agenda. And I was like, no, agendas just kind of lock in. We just need to know what we're going to talk about without going off on big, long tangents.
I forgot. I should ask my husband to this live and not you.
What?
No, I'm just kidding.
But you know what? One thing we did want to say is if you guys have a specific question, we're not going to be able to answer them all. So we can just write it down and get back to you, one of us. And I think that's good. Because we both have a super focus on our channels of making sure that we're showing safe, approved processes. And what is safe and approved? the same thing. If it's approved, it's safe. There you go. Question answered, right?
So if anybody has a question, make sure Jesse can see it, and maybe he can tag me, and we'll be able to see it. So I wanted to go over why Linda and I really want to educate people on food safety and canning food safety.
Mm-hmm.
It's basically our backgrounds in food handling. I grew up on a dairy farm where you have to be inspected, I don't know how many times a year. And we lived so close to Hershey, and we sold our milk to Hershey, where we would, if we got 100%, we'd get Hershey Tart tickets, which we were earned, but never went. But that instilled in me, make sure your areas are clean when you're trying to sell food to the public. And the Vineyard Chicks just popped in. Welcome in. So then I got into the restaurant business, where, you know, if you're touching food, you should know where the food flow is. And I got that big education. And both Lynn and I have been certified by the National Restaurant Association for food safety.
With like the food handler cards.
Yeah. So we have, in order to keep your card, which mine's expired because I'm no longer in food service, you have to take a course for how many hours and take a test on it. And in order to pass, don't you have to get a score of 80?
I think it is. I think it's like 80. Yeah. So, but you know what? You can get this, you can do it, like people who work in restaurants. And I think there's like a rule. If you have, like you were saying, you were a manager, so you had it, but people under you didn't, because one person there has to have the card, because they're making sure that everybody is handling food properly. And if you think about it, like you watch how people go out to a salad bar, for example, and switch the food out in a salad bar, there's a method to it, and there's a way that they have to do it in order to ensure things are safe. But I feel like those safe methods should not just apply to the public. They should apply in your own home. And like I was just telling Leanne, I used to go over to my mom's house, and I would open the refrigerator door and like, what are you growing? It was like, she'd like, I cooked that like a week and a half ago. It's still good, but it's not. And and there's a lot of things that you can do in your kitchen, which should extend into your canning and food preservation processes to help keep people safe. Right?
All right. We got a first question.
We do.
And I'm like, oh, I'm looking on the wrong page. We got two questions already. One of them we're already going to answer. All right. Lisa at Lazy Days Ahead wants to know, can you can flour? And
you know, here's the thing. You're going to see a lot of things on, there's millions out there who say, oh, I'm canning flour. And all they're doing is putting it in a jar and putting it in the oven. That's not canning. That's just heat sealing. And so it's not really a canning process. And if you really, really, really want to do that, the best option would be to vacuum seal. If you're going to take things like rice and flour and things, your best storage method is to vacuum seal them or put them in Mylar bags with the oxygen absorbers, because then you're taking the oxygen out. You're not just heating the oxygen that's around the food, so that when it cools down, it sucks the lid on. So that's different. Did that make sense to you?
So for another question, did you hear that?
Nope.
Well, why don't we just get rid of that?
I don't hear anything.
It's like aliens. But anyway, it's still there. Anyway, flour. Most people say to put it in the freezer before you put it into buckets. We heard the echo.
I don't hear an echo. I don't hear anything.
I think I got rid of it because no, I didn't. Do I have my mic up too loud? How's that?
You're good.
All right. People in the chat, give me a thumbs up if where's my thumb? All right, I think it's gone. But anyway, so yeah, they say to put it in the Oh, I took that comment away. Anyway, somebody asked about siphoning. How to prevent siphoning. I still struggle with siphoning, even though I slowly bring my canner back up to pressure, let it vent 10 minutes, then turn off the burner, let it slowly come down, and don't even take it off the burner, and then wait 10 minutes after your plug comes down, then slowly lift the lid up for 5 minutes, add a jar, then take the lid off. And I still have problems with siphoning.
I think a way that I prevented a lot of siphoning was that I would take the lid of my pressure canner off and then just set it there for 10 minutes. And what happens is the pressure equalizes the heat. It's not just the heat, it's also from going from inside really hot to cold, and it will spurt kind of like, oh, and then you'll see sometimes, why did some things siphon and they didn't? Well, sometimes if you take things out, whether it's boil water or whether it's pressure canning, and set them on your counter, and you can see some jars are really boiling and some aren't. It's just different in how they're handling the heat change. So preventing siphoning can be done in a lot of ways, like making sure that you've got your rings the fingertip tight, making sure that you are giving it the time to everything to kind of come to the same temperature before you move them out. Not totally the same temperature, but you know what I mean. You need to not take it off real quick, because that's just a drastic change. So those kind of things will help prevent siphoning. I did see another question over here. Oh, one of my favorites.
And hot packing.
Huh?
Hot packing. Hot packing.
Yep. Those can happen too. And sometimes it can happen. Oh, I just lost my train of thought.
Sorry.
I'll get it back. This one is I love this question about, do you recommend a steam canner for water bath canning? For some things, I love my steam canner because it's not as heavy. If I'm doing things that are short, like if I'm doing tomato products that are like 40 minutes, I'll do them in a boiling water canner, because it's too long. But if I'm just doing some things that are maybe 10 or 15 minutes, I love using my steam canner. And if you look at the National Center for Home Food Preservation, you can find the proper guidelines in using the steam canners. And the one I have actually has a little gauge handle on the top that shows you when the needle gets to the green for me, because I'm at 1,000 feet, then it's the right temperature. Because the steam inside is the same temperature as boiling water. It's actually hot. So I use it depending on what I'm canning and the length of time.
I forget Grace's name, Grace and Fire's name, but she says it's new to her and kind of scary. So you have tutorials on that, right?
Do it, huh?
Do you have tutorials on steam canning on your channel?
I do. I have a video on there I did a video on using a steam canner. But you can also go to the National Center. They've got a great publication on steam canning. It's not scary. And you have to vent it. You have to vent it just like a pressure canner. That's kind of a weird thing. There's little holes, and you have to make sure until there's a good column of steam, like 6 or 8 inches. I'm just quoting from my memory. You might want to double check that. But you make sure that it's a solid steam. That way you know the inside is completely filled with steam, and you can go to canning.
And we got Greg in here.
Hi, Greg.
And we got Darren from Forehaven Farm. And we got Dolores from Gulf Coast Urban Farm. And we got Rosie in here. I did lower my volume. Maybe it's not on the right setting. I apologize, folks. So my mod dropped the link to the National Center for Food and Preservation for you.
Put that a favorites bar on your computer, you guys.
Yes.
I have it on my phone right now in case you ask something I don't know, because I don't know everything, and I never, ever do something from memory. My memory is 62 years old. See right there. The best.
Rosie says, what do they say about pressure cookers as a pressure canner?
You can you can cook in a canner, but you can't can in a cooker.
Even if it's stovetop.
Huh?
Even if it's stovetop.
Right. Well, no, they're talking like if you have a pressure cooker, even the old kind that's a stovetop, you can't can in it because they're not made. You need to have a big enough pot, because part of the heat up and cool down is calculated in a larger pot, and those things are they're not going to happen in a cooker, because cookers are generally lighter weight, and they take a lot less time to heat up and cool down. So that time, it's not just the canning time, the so many minutes, but it's also the heat up and the cool down estimation that is added to that time as a processing time. So using a pressure cooker is not a good idea. It's not recommended. You should use a pressure canner. And you can cook in those. You can make soup. You can put a turkey in there. You can do all that stuff, but you can't can in a cooker. That's the rule.
I exited all of YouTube.
Huh?
They're asking if I have YouTube open, but I don't.
Mm,
My fancy new mic, I guess.
I don't know.
All right. I'll try not to.
You're welcome, Rosie. Go over to my channel, Grace, and check it out. I did a steam canner video a while ago, and I talked about the anatomy of it and how it works. And it's awesome. They're awesome. They're not nearly as heavy. Huh?
If Jesse can find that video for you, he's awesome at
who knows where it is. Oh, here's a tip. When we're talking about canning and the weight of canning, that's one of the reasons I like it, because I'm older and I don't like to have to lift the heavy water, boiling water canner. One of the things too is if you have a stove like I do that's got the burners, the elements. I had an older stove, and I noticed when I started, I put oil in a pan one day and it all kind of went over to the side very slightly, but I thought my stove is tipping. It's like, going down in the middle. And I realized it was from the weight of all the canning I did, because I did a huge amount of canning. And it was starting to kind of weigh on the stove. So when I got a new stove, you know how you can lift the top of your stove up? I got the white tiles that you can just get like at a hardware store, and I stacked about 6 or 8 of them up under the center of my stove where the 4 burners are, right in the center. And I've had that stove for years, and it still is level, because that supports it. So you want something that supports the center of your stove if you're going to do a lot of heavy canning. There's a tip.
My husband put under mine. Let's see if I change a setting on my mic. Maybe that would help.
I think you sound great.
Oh, it's weird noises. Anyway,
Ooh.
We have the $1 million question.
I see it. There it is.
Why I asked you to come on here tonight.
I am actually going to look at the national. Actually, we were just talking about this. A bunch of the gals and I that are canning together. We're canners. We were talking about this the other day, and that's a huge thing. First of all, like I said a minute ago, a canner, to be a canner, needs to have 4 quart jars standing up in it. You're never going to get that in those electric ones. Plus, I can just make a little list. They are not made to take as long to heat up and cool down. In fact, it's the way I understand it. I won't say it's a fact because I don't make them, but they are like, people don't want to put something in there and wait a long time. So they are made to heat up fast and to cool down fast. So that's taken away from the canning time. And, they show them laying the bottles on the side. Well, that's not right, because if you've got the liquid up against the top, you're not going to get the headspace air out like you should. And there is actually a publication at the National Center for Home Food Preservation on them. And I think if you go to the main page and go down, there's blog, and then there's frequently asked questions, and they address that, because that's a huge question right now. And I'm just going to look it up and see if I can find some of the tips. But really, the point is, even if the directions say that you can do it, and there is one that's put out that kind of looks like it, but it's for water bath canning. It's by Ball, I think, or Presto, and it only does water bath recipes. But yeah, they are not intended for that, because they also don't have a 10-minute vent cycle. So the entire inside of a canner has to be completely filled with steam. And if that's why you vent for 10 minutes, because it gets the cool air pockets out. And even under jars, in the little divot under the jar, can be a cooler air pocket, which will alter very slightly, but still alter the atmosphere inside of there. So those little things don't vent for 10 minutes before you close them. As soon as pressure builds up, they do that. Also, some of them will say, well, it reaches the right pressure for canning. Great. it can reach the right pressure for canning, but there has to be, we were just talking about this yesterday. There's a thermal heat that has to penetrate, and canning is not based on the pressure that's in there. The pressure is there to create the temperature, which then creates the heat inside of the canned food. And so the pressure can be there all day long. But if the heat inside the food that's being canned is not that hot for the length of time it needs to be, and having a fully steamed atmosphere, it is not going to be what you should be using for canning.
And a constant,
Huh?
and a constant temperature.
Right, a constant temperature. And I've heard that some people will say that some of those things are built with a I've heard this, so I'm not a facts person, but I've heard that some of those are built with like an automatic shutoff. So if you're canning something and it gets too long and that little electric element gets too hot, it will actually kind of shut off for a couple of minutes so that it can cool back down, and then it'll turn back on. Well, if you've got a canner on your stove and you watch it sometime when you turn your burner off when you're done with the canning process, you watch how quickly your pressure goes down. So your pressure can go down and then come back up, and you're still altering the pressure, and that can also create other problems. And that's one of the things that creates siphoning problems.
And also
So there's that. Did that answer your question? I hope so.
The National Center of Food Preservation.
Yes, I see that, Rosie. Presto is trying to come out with a electric pressure canner.
Mm-hmm.
I think there's more research on that needs to be done.
Because Presto tries to say they've been approved by the USDA on their box.
I don't hear you now.
I hit settings. All right, audio. Can you hear me now? No?
Yeah.
Can you? Can you hear me? No.
Not very.
All right. Well,
hear my echo.
can you hear me now?
I can hear you better, yes.
All right.
You're still pretty quiet. Folks.
Let's see here.
You're getting better.
Come on, headphones. All right, there we go.
Okay.
Well, I'm glad we got that solved. I apologize, folks. All right.
I can hear you now.
So, poor Pondering says she bought hers off a YouTuber saying it's safe.
You're going to see those on YouTube being used.
And that's all we're going to say about that.
That's all I'm going to say about that.
Because we don't want to talk about other people. All right.
No, there's a lot of people, and I don't think that they're doing anything maliciously or anything, because they look at the instructions, and the instructions say that it reaches the proper pressure for pressure canning, and I don't think that people have enough resources oftentimes to really get to the bottom of those things. That's what I think.
So, well, that noise is still there. But anyway, we also haven't mentioned the fact that the electric pressure canners are plugged into a 110 outlet versus the stove that's plugged into a 220.
Well, and I actually just looked up on the National Center for Home Food Preservation under their burning issues topic, and it's the first one that comes up. And it says, even if the instructions say that, well, that's what I just told you. If the instructions say, and you got a button on the front that says jars, our recommendations were determined for stovetop pressure canners, which hold 4 or more quart-sized jars standing right, and it says, we do not know if the thermal process development work has been done in order to justify the canning advice that is distributed with these pressure multi-cooker appliances. What we do know is that our canning processes are not recommended for use in electric pressure multi-cookers at this time. And then it goes on, and there's, if you really, really want to know, number one talks about the thermal process. Number two talks about is temperature, not pressure, which I just described to you. And three is how to ensure the safety of a final product. And the big concerns is that the USDA low acid pressure process times rely on a combination of heat from the time the canner is coming to pressure, during the actual process time, and then during the early stages of cool down. And so it goes on to describe more there. So there is an entire bit on the National Center for Home Food Preservation under the Burning Issues tab.
Diane wants to talk about milk.
Okay. You can talk about milk. No, you can't can milk. I mean, here's the thing. You see people doing milk and they do butter and all that stuff. If you don't find an approved recipe for that, then I will just say, if I can't find an approved recipe for it, it's not something that I'm willing to do.
And as a dairy farmer's wife, I would say, why can't you just, there is so much of it out there, it's cheap. Why put it away? You're going to hurt the dairy farmers in the end. And why would you want to hurt your food supply?
Well, and also I think a lot of these things like butter and stuff, the quality, it it's not going to be like, you're not going to be able to. I don't know this for a fact, but the it's going to change. It's not going to be the same product that you put in the jar. And you see people do milk and they're like, well, now it's a little bit browner. Well, that's because there's been a change in the milk. It's not good to do that.
I
So,
can't see it being tasting good.
and you can get things like sweetened condensed milk and all that stuff, because proprietary methods, when they do in commercial canning, cannot be replicated in a kitchen. So, kind of, I think that when people realize there's limitations to what you can do in a kitchen. So, just because you see it in the grocery doesn't mean you can go home and do it. If you really want canned milk, get that stuff you see at the grocery store.
And it lasts a while.
Yeah.
Do we know the temperature for commercial canning?
No. I think it's different for everything that they're doing. I think it's different, but here's a little thing. I was thinking about this one day, and I thought, how can I really impress upon people what density is in a can? And I was at the grocery store one day, and it was Thanksgiving time, and I picked up one of those little cans of pumpkin pie, and I just happened, I guess my grandkids were here, and I was like, oh, I'll get some applesauce. Same size can. I don't remember the difference, but the weight of the pumpkin was so much heavier than the applesauce. And I thought, right there is your perfect explanation of what density is. Like, the weight of the pumpkin versus the applesauce was hugely different. So I don't know about commercial canning, but I would assume that it's probably different temperatures based on what they're canning or what they're preserving or putting up. I don't know.
So is there a tested recipe for ghee?
Not that I know of. I know ghee's a good thing, though. I know people that make it and keep it in their fridge. I don't know if it can be frozen. That's something we could look into and get back to you.
All right.
I don't know about ghee.
Can I hit the button? There we go.
I think you can. I'm going to say I think you can substitute spices as long as they're dried spices. Like, if you're going to take powdered cinnamon and powdered nutmeg, and I'll change those. But I'll look, and Tony, I'll get back to you if there's a difference on that. But I think, as long as, I feel like I know that. I feel like as long as it's powder, like if it's the powdered dried cinnamon versus the dried nutmeg, but you can't do like fresh, because that can alter, that can be low acid. Did that help you? I hope so.
That makes sense.
Yeah, it's just powder.
I just try not to put too many spices in my canning because you don't know how it's going to taste after you open the jar anyhow.
Hmm. And they used to say, I guess there's different spices they used to say, or herbs they used to say would change, and they change over a period of time. So that's why I think that a lot of recipes don't really have a lot of spices. You can add all the spices you want when you open the jar.
Because I loaded
I
up
always
stuff
add
in my
salt when
food.
I open the jar because I try to limit that.
So we haven't talked about the different reasons or different headspaces requirements.
Oh, I love headspace. Why do they have them?
Or you just said different headspace requirements. Like, yeah, that you said that was a common question that you get from
Oh,
new
me?
people.
Did I tell you that?
That was on my list.
Okay. So people do. They ask me how come, like, if they're like you're canning and you've got just a jar that's like an inch low, why you can't can it? Well, head spaces are calculated based on the food and the expansion of the food and the ability to evacuate the air that's in the jar. So if you have something that's going to expand a lot, which chicken just went up to a larger headspace, and I almost wonder if
Mhm.
that's because chicken has been manipulated. You ever seen when I was
Oh,
young, a chicken breast was like this. When you look at a chicken breast now, it's like that. And they've changed the headspace, I believe, to a 1.25 inches instead of 1 inch. I can verify that. But it's so that um, it's so that the air can properly evacuate, and if you have too much of a headspace, potentially air that's in that jar would not get out, and then you would have spoiled food. So you always really want to check your headspace and go by the guidelines that it tells you. Because and that's also like when you go to the fair, you can see that jars of beautiful food was disqualified, or they've been disqualified because the headspace is too much, because that could potentially be an unsafe food. But it's really just based on the expansion of the food that's in there, and the making sure that all of the air will be evacuated out of the jar.
all right. If I can. Oops, wrong one. Pinto beans.
Oh, what's my bean water ratio? Oh, you're asking another one of those questions that people are doing out there with the dried beans of a filled, aren't you? That's what the question is about. It's about putting the dried beans in there and filling it with water, and we don't do that. Um, Beans need to be rehydrated, and I have a video over there, and it's not too old, on why you should rehydrate the beans. And yes, I see people doing this all the time, and they do it because they've seen it and they think that makes sense. But if you I did a video, and I actually took the dried sponges and put them on top of ball jars. And I took one of the sponges and kind of rehydrated it and set it on top of the ball. You know, those dehydrated sponges are like a little cardboardy thing, but they become a sponge. And I put them on the jars, and then I poured water. And you can see the one that was rehydrated, the water goes through much quicker than the one that wasn't. It has to absorb and rehydrate before the water goes through. That water going through is an example of the heat from the liquid going through the bean. And so the difference with the one that was rehydrated, how much water could go through, shows the difference in basically the canning time of the heat penetrating the bean. And people say, well, what's the real difference between heat? Like, why is it that kind of heat? And I always remember someone saying one time, you can take hot pads and reach into an oven at 350 and take a casserole out, right? Would you even put a hot pad on your hand and reach in boiling water for a second? No, because that liquid thermal heat is different type of heat, and it has to completely penetrate the bean. And the only way it's going to do that if is that bean is already receptive to the water. So if that's the ratio you're asking about, there's my answer. Don't do
And
it.
I just don't can beans anymore because there's more than one way to get them ready to eat.
Yeah, if you cook them in a pressure cooker too, you can cook them all day long and then freeze them. You know,
Because
if you really, and here's the thing too, if it's not that much effort to put some beans in a pot and leave them for overnight, and I always feel like my rule is if I don't have time to do it right, I don't have time to do it now. So That's my. I should have a T-shirt that says that.
Like the National Center for Food and Preservation has one recipe for canning beans, but when you're cooking beans on the stove, they cook at different rates.
Hmm.
So therefore, that's my reason why I don't want to can beans anymore, because you just don't know what you're going to get.
Yeah,
All right.
and also the canning of the beans too, the preparation of the beans, it gives you a little bit of an eyeball on the fact that older beans will take way longer to cook than fresher beans. And so by preparing them, and you don't know, you may say, well, I bought this last week. Well, how long's it been in a warehouse? You don't know. And so that's a way to make sure that beans are ready to receive that heat. And I love who just said that after 35 years, they now know the reason for headspace. I love that. That was good. There it is, Peacemaker. I'm glad.
Before I forget, I
I'm a
asked
real bean chemist. No, I'm not. I just followed the guidelines. You
Linda
could be
knows
a
her
chemist
stuff.
too.
It's just educating yourself. Now,
Mhm.
today I asked Linda, and I thought this was a dumb question, but then she let me know it wasn't. You see this right here?
Oh.
I said to Linda, is this still safe to can with? Thinking that I thought, sure, I can use it. She's like, no. You want to tell them why?
Because if it's chipped, it's just possible the integrity of the jar can be affected, because it's just like when you use a metal thing to scoop things out of a canning jar. You don't want to use metal, because the metal, you hear it hitting the jar, it can actually create a micro scratch, and that kind of affects the integrity of the jar, and it can break. If that's chipped, it could still do the same thing. So any jar that, just use it for put your dehydrated stuff in there.
And Jesse's sharing your video on how to pre-soak your beans.
There it is. That's a good one. I like
That's
that one.
why he's my moderator. He's awesome.
He's good. Yeah, it's an important thing.
We
I
should
would
go
say you
over.
don't get a do-over on dying, you know. So there's that.
We should have put that on a tee.
Yeah, you don't get a do-over on dying. Yeah, if you can't do it right, don't do it now, and you don't get a do-over on dying. And
Look,
my famous one that I've known for at work for years is danger never takes a day off. That's true too.
yes.
Yeah.
Lid buckling. What is too
Too tight.
tight? What's not tight enough? Because I feel like I don't listen tighten them too much.
You know
Like
what I do? I put it on until it gets the resistance, and then I just kind of back up a little. Like you're not tightening it on, but you hit the resistance a little bit and then back up a little. So it's not loose, but it's still on there, but not unscrewed. That's true. It could chip again and leave glass in your food. Georgina. That was a good point. Your glass.
leave the food in the food. Yeah.
Put glass in. Yeah, true.
Then I'll lose my precious food. So I'm not taking
Hmm.
that risk.
Not after the work you put into it.
Like reusing lids.
I take all my lids off and I wash them and I put an X with Sharpie on them and I use them for my dehydrated stuff.
I should do
I
that
don't.
because I've used good lids and I'm like debating on my dehydrated food that I'm debating if I've actually canned with them.
Oh, put an X on them.
Like I'm questioning it. I'm like, And I'm like, when
Mm.
in doubt, don't use it.
Yep.
All right. The 24-hour rule. About, if it sits on the counter for 12 hours, I get angsty about if it doesn't seal or not.
Well, if it's within 24 hours, as far as the guidelines show, if it's within 24 hours, you can take it and recan it. But you'd want to probably check your jar and see if it needs to go in a new jar. There could be a nick at the top of the ring that's preventing the lid from sealing. You'll definitely want a new lid, always.
But
But
if
yeah,
you're
you can
pressure canning and
reprocess
you don't have the required 2 quarts to go in the canner or the 4 pints, it's kind of pointless.
But you know what? That's not a national center thing. That's a ball thing. They just put
Oh,
that in. That's in a jar. That's not. I believe that that's just in their book. That's not a specific. But it is. Why would you want to do one? And also freeze. Put it in the fridge and use it within the next couple days. And you can always put a new lid on it and just put it in the freezer. Like I've had beans where for some reason like 3 or 4 didn't seal, so I just took them out and put them in my freezer. You can freeze in a ball jar or in a canning jar.
all right. Kristen says about there's a learning curve to Tatler lids.
Yeah.
I've only used 2 so far because I'm nervous about it.
I had a learning curve too, but they work great for me now. And what I do is I take them as soon as I take it out, I have like a hot pad that I hold the jar with and tighten it down as tight as I can get it. And I've not had one fail since. There's my curve.
Little Southern Brothers, I haven't had problems finding lids this year, but last year I couldn't find any. After, yeah, I couldn't. I had to win some. All right. And Dolores says she loves the idea of putting an X on your lid.
Yeah. Oh, good.
Oh, here's a question we were talking about before we came on.
We were.
Felicia's a mind reader.
Yes, she is. So the answer to that is, Felicia, what do you want to do? There is no right or wrong, but there's reasons why everybody does things the way they do. I do not leave rings on because I live in a humid climate and the rings will literally rust to the jar. I also do not want to have a lid on there that should for some reason a jar become unsealed, like the top comes off. The ring will hold it down, and if there's a temperature fluctuation, especially people that keep their things like outside in a barn or a shed, it can reseal. And you wonder how can that be? Have you ever had like a jar or a bottle of something in your car and it sits there and gets really, really hot and you turn the air conditioning on and you go to try to open it and you can't? It's like it just was brand new again. That's what can happen. And if you have the ring on there, it will allow that to happen. If you don't have the ring on there and that flat becomes unsealed, it's not going to stick back down. So that's why I do not leave rings on my jars, but my friend does because she feels that it keeps the rings with the jars. And that's really the only reason she ever gave me for that.
My extras are in a tote in the attic.
Yeah, I have a big bag of them hanging in the closet of my pantry.
And Lisa was reading my mind about stacking the jars.
Um,
Can we put cardboard between there or plywood?
well, the thing is that the best practice is not to. Are you talking stacking them in a canner? Yes. You'd want to put a rack between them. Stacking them in your pantry, you don't want to do that because, of course, it's your pantry, but it will pull. It will be like the ring. It will push down in the bottom jars. So if they become unsealed, it's there, and so you wouldn't know that they've become unsealed. It's also a good thing to go through your pantry annually and check to make sure you don't have any jars that are unsealed. But what I have done to help with space control in my pantry, when you go to the store and they've got there's like little wire racks that you can put in your kitchen to put your dishes on and things, those are just about that much taller than a pint jar. So I put all my pint jars in their cases, and then I put one of those in there with the legs down between the jars, and then I can put a whole nother case on top and still have about that much space between them because that jar keeps the case from sitting right on top of the other jars. There you go. In your pantry. You shouldn't because it can do that.
Hello, blind
Hi.
guy, his wife, and their life.
How's it going?
I met her, and they talk about canning as jarring.
I know. I know. I've had people like they're from Canada or something, and they're like, "Why do you say canning? It's not a can, it's a jar. You should say jarring, just because of the where we're from."
So I thought, I love talking with this sound in my ears. But anyway,
Okay.
all right, Tony. Why is it show? There we go.
I have not heard about that. I have not heard about that. And as far as I understand, I guess I have not heard that.
All right. People were asking about if we were using our lids. And no, we don't recan with our lids. It's too much work for it to fail while it's on the shelf or even in the canner. So you'll never see me reuse a lid. And the other thing that we had on here was modifying salsa.
Not if you want it to be safe.
Like
you don't want to add things to salsa. Like people say, oh, I want it to be more onion, or I want to have extra peppers. The salsa recipes that are approved are calculated based on the acidic and high acid and low acid foods in combination, and so you don't want to alter that.
Like you could modify sweet peppers with jalapeno peppers, right?
Yeah, you can do like red peppers for green peppers in the same amount, but you don't, like if you have one that's like jalapenos and serranos, you can do it all serranos or all jalapenos, but you can't change the amounts. And you can always look when you're looking at recipes. Most of the time, there will be a thing on the recipe that says you can substitute peppers, but for them, you can do red onions instead of white onions or yellow onions, but you always want to make it the same amount.
And Little Southern Brother said about he's never done it. And Diane says that she checks her seals after a month. That's
Good idea.
Good practice.
Now that I'm retired, I'll probably check my pantry more often.
Are you going to do once a month inventory sheets?
Me? No, I do once in a while. Go down and see if I need something, then go, oh man, I'm short on that. I need to go make more. That's my inventory system.
I have to figure out how to do this, but I would love to show my pantry shelves of how my shelves are 2x4s on the end, and then I took chalk paint and chalked the whole side of it. Then now I have chalk markers, so if I move if my room moves, I can just dry it off and rewrite what's on that shelf. So
that's such a good idea.
Then I write what year I canned it, because you never know how long it's been on my shelf and how many I have of that jar when I do my inventory.
That's a great idea.
But I have to figure out how to do it without exposing myself. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, Andale, nice to see you. She's one of my moderators too.
This is kind of fun. I'm having a good time here. I'm super glad that all of these people are literally here to find out how to do safe procedures, whether it's just cooking in your kitchen. And like Leanne and I were talking about people who do I use them for vacuum. Yeah. People who, you don't think about these things. Like you go home and you're going to wash off an apple because you're going to bite into it, right? How many of you wash off your cantaloupes and your watermelons or your bananas? Not, it's like people don't think of that, but when you take a knife and cut down through it, any of the stuff that's on the outside gets drugged down into the fruit. So always wash everything, even your bananas, because you can peel it and it can flop back and hit the inside of it. So you always want to do that. And wearing an apron. You wear an apron all the time, don't you, Leanne?
Not all the time, but I try to.
I am always, I get up and it's part of my uniform at home. But it's not just to keep splashes and things off your clothes. It's also to keep what's on clothes off of your food.
So loving the information about acidity balanced in salsa.
Good.
And Jesse's
Just follow an
reminding
approved
everybody.
recipe. And if you have an old recipe, you can submit it oftentimes to an extension office or to a program. Like a lot of times, extension offices and things will have uh, food preservation programs, workshops, and things, and they will either help you out or they'll know where you can go to get an old recipe to see if it's safe. So that, why not? Sometimes they'll say, this would be safe if you cut back on the amount of, say, peppers. And so it gives you ability to be able to check that out.
You mentioned bananas. Which which way do you peel it from? Which
The
end?
bottom,
So do I.
yeah. That's, you know what? You watch a monkey, that's how monkeys do it. They don't peel it from the hard thing that sticks on the tree. They peel it from the bottom, the bloom end.
I don't know how long I've been doing it, at least 1 or 2 years. Like I
Really?
always yeah, I used to do it from the stem end and I'm like then I saw somebody doing it. And yeah, from the blossom end, or I guess
Yeah.
would it be the blossom end?
Yeah, it's
It's
the
so much
blossom.
easier to
And
post.
for years I would like cut it and pull it, and my granddaughter was sitting there. She's like, "Grandma, why don't you do it from the other end?" I'm like, "I don't know." And she goes, "Look, that's how monkeys do it." And I was like, "So, it takes like a 7-year-old to show me." Yeah,
I
just
haven't done it, but I think I don't do it because if it goes in the freezer, I'm going to forget about it, to be
I
honest with
know a
you.
lot of people that will can when, like, annually when they clean out their freezer, they'll just thaw the meat out and can it.
Wow, Stinks is here and it's 2 a.m. there.
Oh my gosh,
I thank you, my friend.
that's cool.
Love the support. Somebody from the Netherlands suggested that we put in milliliters and grams into our recipes if we want the non-Americans to watch us. So I'm going to try to do that more often. Yeah, it's how much work. Linda's not happy
I
about
don't
it.
know, but I think that probably a good idea.
Now we made Andale feel weird. I wondered if anybody was catching on to what we were saying.
I know. I know.
And Marla's thanking you because she's new to canning.
Well, thank you for being here. That's super cool.
Oh, Sphinx is speaking German now, and I don't have my translator. I think he's going to bed.
Okay.
I think that's what that
Night.
means. I think that's what he means.
Oh, any advice on switching from a dial gauge to a jiggler? I've done all of my Prestos because I prefer the jiggler, and the dial gauge can be out of kilter. Like you can't, you can drop a jiggler and it's still the same thing. You can bang a gauge and it can be off. So you just order, there's a, like if you looked at my video of our great hardware store, I just take my lids down and I go, "Can you make this a jiggler?" And they go, "Yeah." So you can contact Presto. You get the 3-piece weight, and there is actually a little the pitcock, I think they call it, the little
Petcock.
vent. Huh?
Petcock.
Yeah, that fits with the weight, and all you do is switch them out on your canner, and it's kind of cool. I watch it because it's like a dual duty thing, and I'll notice when my weight starts wiggling, usually my pressure gauge is right there, so I know my pressure gauge good. But I like that.
You mentioned recently, I don't know if it was a video or live, that you should have your pressure gauge tested before you even start canning.
After, if you do a lot of canning, you should, all like at canning season, you should get it checked. Um, and at least once a year, like when you get your canner out after it's been stored for a while, always if you've dropped your lid or if you've banged it or something, you want to get it um, checked. A lot of extension offices have pressure canning, uh, pressure gauge testing, but also like certain hardware stores that will do it too. And I think I don't even know. Somebody said she takes it and a mechanic checks it because they've got those pressure gauges.
Yeah,
And
they
they just check to make sure that their gauge says the same thing that the dial does.
Yes. I'm afraid to talk with this mic. Yeah, I was going to suggest that you can go to AutoZone, or they're just testing the PSI. And I wish I would have known that sooner, because I would think in my little county of 14,000 people that you wouldn't have the extension office that would have it. But yeah, they did. So now I'm like, oh, well, I should. But now I just use the 3-piece weight, because I got my model number off my canner and called Presto and said, I need the 3-piece weight that is compatible with my canner. And the lady was a canner, and she's like, yes, you need to use the 3-piece weight. It is way more accurate than the dial gauge. And I've been loving it ever since, just to get that hula dance going.
I know it. The little rockin' jiggler.
Like,
you can wash your dishes with your back to it too. You don't have to like. God, when I was a new canner, all I had was a gauge. I swear, I pulled a chair up in front of my stove, and literally, I had like my phone or a book, and like every 2 seconds, I was looking. It was bad.
Oh no.
Should not have something with cornstarch changes the density. So, whatever I would personally, like I say, people can do whatever they want, but personally, I would not keep that. I hope you didn't do that, but I wouldn't because it's got cornstarch in it. That's just me.
And density causes it not to heat up the proper temperature. Therefore, pathogens might possibly be growing inside your jar. I'm looking. God,
Sorry, I hate to tell people that. I mean, but it's entirely up to you.
Yeah, do your own research.
It's your choice. It's just like people that are canning in their electric pressure cookers. That's their choice. I have a Miro with the round jiggler 5, 10, and 15. Can I switch to? And I don't know. I have an old Miro also.
My mom has 5.
Actually, I think Miro. You can contact Presto, because I have 2 old Miro canners. Like one of them is so old it still has the wooden handles. It's like wooden. It was my grandma's. And I think the Presto pieces will work with it, because I think Miro and Presto, I want to say, are the same. So contact Presto and see if it will.
Renee asked, how often should the seal be replaced?
I do mine every year. And storing it will extend it too. If you do a ton of canning, but just check it for its integrity. Is it getting loose? Has it got little cracks? Does it still look new? It's kind of based on how your it is.
And do you ever put Vaseline on it?
No. People do, and that's fine. What I do is when I clean my canner out, here's some good canner tips. I wash it thoroughly. I take the the rubber out of it, or the gasket, and then I take a little bit of cooking oil in my hand and I roll it. I roll the gasket in my hand like that with a little cooking oil, and then I wrap it up in a paper towel and put it in the canner. Also, I take my canner and I fill it with newspaper, and then I make like a wreath, like a ring of newspaper. And I mean, I've had the same one for years that goes on my canner. And then I put that on the top and turn the lid upside down so that the gauge is inside. And that keeps the ring from getting banged. And when you use those your pressure cookers or pressure canners, cookers too, when you're cooking them, you don't want to hit your spoon on it because it can create little nicks, and that will let steam out. So you don't want to do that, whether it's a cooker or a canner. But I put the newspaper in there and turn the lid upside down, and that's how I store it with the gasket inside. Another thing too is if you do a lot of smelly stuff like tuna, like I do a lot of tuna and salmon, I put some vinegar on the paper, or if you're doing something that smells bad, put vinegar on the newspaper and it'll help eliminate the odor in your canner.
Hi, Jan. She just started pressure canning. She's so wonderful.
Oh, it's such an adventure.
She's such a sweet lady. And somebody just said they're running late. I'm sorry, Debbie. You're going to have to catch the replay. We've done lots of fun-filled information this hour. And I'm reading some of these comments.
I had to put a, yeah.
She was messaging me the first time she was using it. I'm like, you're doing fine. You might want to turn down your flame, but you're doing fine.
If you look on your canner, though, if you understand, and I do have a video explaining the pressure canner, but if you look on your canner, there's like usually if it's not, I don't know about All Americans. I had one and I didn't like it. I sold it right away. But I did. There's a little rubber release. If it gets too much pressure, that release will go there and go, psh, and you'll be fine. Yeah, I had an All American, and I used a Presto or a Miro for so many years. Like I've always used one, and I got this beautiful All American, and I was like, I hate it. I did twice in it, and I sold it.
Well, you see my antique All American
I know
the
it.
1930s.
I know. I wish I knew more about them.
So Dinah wants to know if you can buy the 3-piece weight for the All American.
I have no idea.
I would suggest Red General Store in Virginia. They're supposed to be the manufacturer, the representative for All American. It's Red something. Jesse, look it up. It's Red something, Red General Store or something. They're supposed to be the ambassador for All American.
Mm.
Oh, we're at our time up. It's 8:30. So Tracy wants to know, this is a very important question. If I can hit the show button here. All right, I'm going to tell it. Okay, well, she's just asking why would my gauge fluctuate?
When you're canning,
I'm assuming
like when you're actually in the process, it can be your heat, like your heat's going up or down.
Or she's not finding that sweet spot.
Yeah, and like I have 4 pressure canners. 5 pressure canners. I have one that I didn't open because I won it at the county fair. I won it for being the canning queen. That's true. But I haven't opened it yet. But I have them, and the thing is, each one of them has its own sweet spot. Like when I put the old one on that's got the wooden handles, I know that when it reaches pressure, and a lot of times people will go, "Oh, okay," and they'll just turn it down really fast. You have to slowly lower the heat, and like I know that one I have to set it on 4. It will be perfect at 4, whereas the one that looks just like it, that has the black plastic handles, it's 7. So you don't wanna change your heat, up and turn your heat up or down too quickly because it'll, like, go down and then it'll come up and it'll go down. So you wanna kinda just slowly adjust your heat so that you just barely see it moving and you can keep it there. That's why.
One guilt free is asking about the Presto electric canner. I want to tell you, you have to go back and watch the replay. We've discussed that in depth earlier.
There is a Presto electric canner, and I believe that I've never been interested in it, so I haven't looked at it. But the last time I heard anything is that Presto is actually either has or is trying to develop an electric pressure canner, which would be wonderful because then people would stop using their electric pressure cookers. But I don't know if they have yet completed it. But I have the ball water bath canner or boiling water canner, which I love because of the weight. But I don't know if Presto's come out with it yet. But I believe it is Presto that has been doing research on coming out with an electric pressure canner, which I think would be awesome because people would then be doing it in a safer way. I don't know. But as you can see from what we were talking about earlier, there's a lot that needs to go into that to make it effective and to be safe.
So LP has 2 questions.
Black mold on the outer rim of sealed pickles after being in the basement. Did the jars get washed properly? Would be my question. As if it's not inside, okay, but if it's on the outside, I've had that happen where a little bit right around the little rim, um, the base of the threads of the neck of the jar, it was right along one of those, and I think that it just didn't get washed well. And would you still eat it as long as it's not inside? I mean, personally, I would ma- I would I w- my first thought would be how well did it get washed? And if we burnt the bottom of applesauce but went ahead and canned it, any known concerns, would not it will taste like smoked applesauce. I've done that.
I think
It
I've done
doesn't
it.
taste good. Yeah, it tastes funky. And there's nothing you can do to fix it. It tastes like scorched applesauce. It's gross.
Oh, and Rose is saying you can still use the food after or the jar afterwards, right?
Yeah.
And also with glass isn't porous, so if the mold's on the outside, it's not going to be in the inside. No way if it's sealed up.
Yeah. Oh, Rosie said it hasn't been tested yet to see if it holds proper pressure. Okay, that's good. I never really looked into it after I saw it because I have my pressure canners that I'm comfortable with, but I can see how that would be a real draw for people who are wanting to get into pressure canning, but they're afraid of it. But really, there's nothing to be afraid of. It's actually easy. To me, the things that I do in a pressure canner is easier canning than the things I do in a boiling water canner. Do you feel the same way, Leanne?
Mm-hmm.
It's like usually it's a product. It's like meat. It's like it's not like, oh my gosh, it's going to take all this stuff to put these things together to water bath can.
It takes just as long. I've tried it.
Yeah.
Well, it's
And I'm not saying to water bath can things that you would pressure can. I'm saying that the process to me is easier because I just put the stuff in the jars and it's pressure canned. Whereas things that tend to be water bath canned are things that you have a whole bunch of ingredients and there's a lot of cutting and measuring and all that stuff. So they're very different. I'm
mm-hmm.
lazier that way.
The canned potatoes, the ones that have a weird taste. I would like to preserve some this year.
You can
Don't.
can potatoes. Some people think they taste weird. Although I know somebody that does like the chunks and then she drains them and then seasons them and puts butter in a frying pan and fries them and they turn out really good. And I've done them in the air fryer and they turn out good. What about you, Leanne?
Don't do russets.
No.
I've learned that the hard way. So I'm going to definitely try red or yellow potatoes next. And I've also done French fries. I don't know if that's a tested recipe to cut them into French fry strips, but I'm not going to do those again anyhow because they take just as long in the oven to cook as a French fry as it would if you just cut them. So yeah,
Mm.
not going to do that again. It was pointless.
And a lot of people don't like them because they get the starch. So you need to make sure that if you're going to can potatoes, follow the recipe because a lot of people say, "Oh, I'm just going to put them in their raw pack," and then they get all the starch in there. And that's there's a reason why a recipe tells you to parboil or to blanch or to pre-cook things that are going to be canned.
And Renee uses golden potatoes.
The gold ones, yeah, the Yukon Golds are nice.
I love canned potatoes. It's just I'm not going to do russets again because they look like they're smushed and there's no water in them when I'm done. So I'm like,
They're like a little sponge that degrades. It's like it disintegrates. But they'll tell you in a recipe which ones to use.
well, I think we answered everybody's question.
We did. This was so much fun.
Oh, LP has another question.
I would. I would. It will take it I did some on accident and I thought, "What is that? What is it?" And it because the apple had scorched to the bottom of the pan and it was gross. It's like smoked, scorchy taste. And the canning intensifies the flavor. You said you've done that, Leanne? Scorched an apple?
It was like my first time canning applesauce. I think I walked
Mm.
away from the stove too long. So here's my question. Cooking apples in the Instant Pot to make into applesauce. Can you do it? Because it's not in the directions in the ball book.
Well, I think the ultimate goal is when they wrote the applesauce, I'm just thinking this now. I'm not going to say that it's fact, but I would assume you're cooking it on the burner just to get it to the applesauce consistency, right? So I don't see that that'd be a problem. And I know that people use their slow cookers and do slow cooker applesauce and then can it. And I think the point is just to get it to the applesauce.
Mm-hmm.
Then you can it.
Well, Andale says thank you. I hope everybody's learned something tonight.
Yeah, it was fun.
And Renee, they have raw pack recipes with seasonings, including. Is that?
I haven't seen that.
And Jesse says thank you. No, Jesse, thank you for making this an amazing live, being our moderator
Yes.
the whole time.
Thank you.
He's for hire. I'll sell him to you if you ever go live on YouTube.
I want to go live, but I don't know how to do it. I have to just be invited.
You can do it.
I guess I could. I don't know.
You can do it. I'll push you.
Okay.
Just like how you pushed me to be a YouTuber after I was late.
Well, you're good at it. People like you. So that's good.
Jesse says we'll be waiting for part 2.
Okay. All right. But the cool thing is you can just subscribe to our channels and message us when you have questions, and we'll do all we can to get the right answer, the approved answer to you. And so that's it. Good. I'm glad, Tracy.
Tracy, we love you too.
There you go.
Hi, Annette. I think she just got here. Annette, we're about to take off.
Gonna have to go back.
Go back and watch the replay. Well, all right, folks. Thanks for stopping by the farmhouse today. And I hope it's been worthwhile for you and learned something. And you have anything else planned this week?
Who, me?
Yeah, you.
Any more videos? I gotta can some more. I actually have a couple things I have to do, and then hopefully it won't be raining, and I will work on my garden. I got a gardening to do, lots of it. And I'm gonna do some dehydrated oranges dipped in dark chocolate. So good. And you saw that video today, right? And then I'm gonna do more. I'm gonna do some applesauce fruit leathers, except I'm gonna flavor them like apple pie fruit leather, and I think just like a cinnamon one. So I'm gonna do some of those. I'll do videos on that.
Oh, Cindy, why do you have to come in right at the last second? You go check out her channel. Yeah, Cindy, just go back and watch. It was very informative. You might actually learn something. Yes. All right. Well, take care, folks. And
thanks for stopping by.
Bye.
Bye.